A 30-year-old man lived a life of hardship, toiling endlessly just to survive. He had no special skills or talents, and each day felt like a struggle. But everything changed in an instant when a truck came barreling toward him, ending his life in a flash. When he opened his eyes again, someone was calling him Lord Jin. Confused, he tried to remember who he was. His name was Seitu Gennaro, wasn't it? Before he could make sense of anything, he found himself waking up suddenly, with a woman sobbing beside him. Through her tears, she explained that he had fainted in front of the crown prince. Not only had he been dismissed from his duties as the prince's bodyguard, but he was also banished from the kingdom. Jin was utterly lost. He didn't understand what was happening, so he asked the woman to explain where he was and who he really was. She revealed a shocking truth. He was actually a 14-year-old boy named Jin Nomlin, heir to Duke Nomlin. Since childhood, Jin had served as the bodyguard to the crown prince of the Rosala kingdom. However, earlier that day, the crown prince had commanded him never to appear before him again. The Nomlin family was renowned for producing skilled spearmen, but Jin had no talent for it. Frustrated by his inability to meet expectations, Jin had started acting out. After countless mistakes, the crown prince had finally had enough, stripping him of his title and position. Jin let out a deep sigh, realizing that he had been reincarnated into the life of a troubled child. Memories from his past life slowly began to flood back, merging with the new ones. Now he had two sets of memories to navigate. His servant noticed that Jin seemed unusually calm today, likely because of the shock of fainting earlier. Jin also realized that the traits of his previous self, Jano, were starting to blend into his personality. As he got out of bed, a sudden memory struck him. His servant had mentioned something about his banishment. Shocked, he asked her to confirm if he had heard correctly. She nodded, explaining that after hearing about his dismissal from the royal guard, his own family had disowned him. Lord Azer had been chosen to replace him. Jin was given only 1 month to leave the country. Understanding the harsh reality, Jin realized that exile was essentially a death sentence. The world beyond the capital was crawling with monsters, and without any protection, his chances of survival were slim. Frustration welled up inside him as he grappled with the reality of being reincarnated as an outcast. Turning to his servant, Ella, he asked for her help in getting dressed. But just as she began, something caught his eye. A status screen appeared beside him. His eyes widened in shock as he realized he was the only one who could see it. The more he focused, the clearer the details became. From what Jin knew about this world, only those with the exceedingly rare magic eye could access such a feature. Determined to explore further, Jin concentrated intensely on examining his own status. After a few attempts, he managed to pull it up and was stunned by what he saw. His swordsmanship was ranked S, a mark of extraordinary skill. However, his spear proficiency was rated a disappointing F. Surprisingly, his abilities in water magic and healing were also ranked S, while his earth magic and alchemy were rated A, and fire and wind magic came in at B. But what truly left him speechless was the discovery that his enhancement ability was ranked S. Jin's mind raced as he realized the significance of this. Based on what he knew, there were only 3 people in the entire world with such a rare gift. He might just be the 4th. The thought thrilled him. With such a unique and powerful ability, he could potentially strengthen anything, giving him a real chance at survival in this dangerous world. Jin's thoughts were interrupted when his younger brother, Azer, appeared. Azer apologized for not being able to help him earlier in front of the crown prince. To make amends, he handed Jin some money and a spear. Grateful, Jin thanked him and asked if Azer could gather some travel supplies in exchange for the items he didn't need. Azer agreed, and Jin gave him a list of what he needed. The next day, Azer returned with all the items Jin had requested. Curious, Azer wondered how his brother planned to carry so many things on his own. Jin smiled and hinted that he had a special trick up his sleeve, something even their father didn't know. He then demonstrated his skill, creating a storage box out of thin air, and a magical door appeared. Azer was amazed and peeked inside, discovering an enormous, empty space. Impressed, he praised Jin for his incredible abilities. Jin noticed that Ezer's status also showed a small storage box, but it seemed Ezer was unaware of it. Jin considered telling him about this hidden potential, but decided to keep his appraisal abilities a secret for now. Instead, he thought of a subtle way to inform Ezer, and asked if he could take a small bottle of his red body fluid. Ezer agreed without hesitation. Jin then requested Ezer to accompany him to the Adventurers Guild to register, and Ezer, always the supportive brother, happily agreed. As Jin and Ezer walked through the streets on their way to the guild, they overheard people speaking poorly about him. Jin understood why. They had every reason to dislike him because of his past rude behavior. The only ones who ever defended him were Ayla and Ezer. Ayla, who had been his nurse since childhood, naturally stood by his side. But Jin couldn't quite understand why Ezer looked up to him. His memories didn't offer any clues about this puzzling bond. When they arrived at the guild, they completed the registration process, though the staff treated Jin with obvious disdain. Later that night, Jin practiced his swordsmanship. With his high-ranking sword skills, he couldn't help but wonder how different things might have been if he had discovered his abilities earlier. As he trained, he felt light on his feet and performed exceptionally well. During dinner, Gordon Nomlin, the head of the family, informed Jin that this would be his last meal with him. Jin accepted this calmly and excused himself to prepare for the next day. In his room, Jin gathered his supplies, including clothes and accessories that totaled up to 27 levels. Combined with his base level of 25, his overall enhancement level reached 52. Using this ability drained him, so he replenished his energy by drinking a mana potion before turning his attention to finishing a gift for Ezer. The next morning, Ezer and Ella stood at the western gate of the capital, ready to see Jin off. He thanked them both and handed Ezer a card and a box as a token of appreciation for all of his help. He instructed Ezer to secretly spill a drop of blood on the card and to only open the box once he had left the country. As Jin bid them farewell, Ezer couldn't hold back his tears. Jin, however, was determined to embark on his new adventure. As he gazed at the mountains beyond the capital, Jin's first goal was to reach the border. However, there were several towns along the way that would take days to travel through. He considered using his enhanced body-strengthening ability, powered by his charm. Once activated, his body surged with speed, and he found himself racing across the landscape with incredible swiftness. The thrill of moving so fast filled him with excitement, knowing he could now reach his destination much sooner. After an hour, he decided to take a break. Despite the long run, he wasn't even out of breath. Pleased with his newfound strength, Jin's satisfaction was cut short when he suddenly noticed several injured bodies lying nearby. Shocked, he cried out in alarm, but quickly calmed himself. Just then, a group of goblins appeared, ready to attack. Instinctively, his body reacted faster than his mind, moving to counter the threat. With the power of his charm, Jin swiftly defeated the goblins with ease. After the battle, he sat down by a tree, realizing that he was leveling up quite effectively. Jin had to take a moment to steady himself after the battle. The gruesome scene in front of him was unlike anything he was used to. In this world, it was common to loot equipment from those defeated in battle, so Jin reluctantly gathered a few items from the bodies scattered on the ground. He knew he could return these to the guild for a reward from the families of the fallen, but all he wanted was to leave the country as quickly as possible. Next, Jin had to deal with the monsters. To prove a goblin kill, you had to present its ear and a stone located near its heart, which the guild would pay for. The idea of dissecting the creatures made his stomach churn, but he pushed through the discomfort. On his way to the nearby post town, Rio, Jin encountered many goblins and kobolds. By the time he arrived the next morning, he had grown more accustomed to the battles. Checking his status, he was pleased to see he had leveled up significantly. He also pulled out several spare weapons from his item box, knowing that each piece of equipment could only be enchanted once. Continuing his journey, Jin arrived at a popular rest spot for adventurers. A few were scattered around, tending to their own affairs. Feeling the need to recharge, he took out a mana potion and drank it slowly. Suddenly, a group of wounded men staggered into view, their faces etched with desperation. "Help! We need an X potion, please," they shouted. The nearby adventurers exchanged skeptical glances. "An X potion? Those are incredibly rare and valuable," one murmured. "Who would just give one away?" One of the injured men collapsed to his knees, pleading with anyone who would listen. Moved by their dire situation, Jin stepped forward. "I have an X potion," he announced calmly. The wounded men looked up, hope flickering in their eyes. Assessing that they posed no threat, Jin decided to help. He handed the X potion to one of the severely injured men, who drank it eagerly. In moments, his wounds vanished, and he stood up, fully healed. Jin was amazed at how swiftly the potion worked. A man from the group approached Jin, gratitude evident on his face. "Thank you so much," he said earnestly. "I'm Alec Thunder, leader of the Dragon Tear Guild." He offered Jin a handful of coins, apologizing that it wasn't much. "We were ambushed by a powerful red giant, a high-level monster. It nearly wiped us out," Alec explained. Then, taking a deep breath, Alec bowed deeply before Jin. "As repayment for saving our comrade's life, I offer myself to you as a slave." In this world, such practices were common, but the offer took Jin by surprise. He shook his head firmly. "I appreciate your gratitude, but I don't need a slave," he replied. Jin believed that no one should be bound to another in such a way, regardless of local customs. Suddenly, a horde of orcs appeared, drawn by the scent of blood. These were lower-ranked monsters, and Jin felt confident they could handle them. However, the group that had faced the giant was still recovering, and their equipment was in disarray. Acting quickly, Jin pulled out a variety of weapons from his item box and distributed them among the warriors, getting them ready for the fight ahead. Jin swiftly took down a few orcs while the others jumped into the fray. The battle seemed manageable until, out of nowhere, a group of soldiers was knocked aside by a single devastating blow. The attack came from a B-ranked orc general, towering over the battlefield. Jin rushed forward, attempting to take on the general alone, but with a single strike, the orc sent him flying backward. If not for his enchanted gear, that blow could have been fatal. As the orc general prepared to strike again, Alex sprang into action, landing a surprise attack from behind. Distracted, the orc turned his attention toward Alec. Seeing his chance, Jin seized the moment. He drove his weapon into the orc's head, and after a grueling struggle managed to decapitate the towering beast. With their leader defeated, the remaining orcs panicked and fled the scene, leaving the battlefield in silence. Alec praised Jin for his skills and asked if he was a high-ranking adventurer. Jin shook his head and replied that he was just a beginner, ranked only at G, and managed to defeat the monster thanks to Alec's help. Nearby adventurers overheard Alec mention Jin's name and began whispering among themselves, wondering if this was the same Jin Nonlin who had been exiled. Realizing there was no point in hiding, Jin confirmed his identity. The adventurers were shocked. Jin didn't match the dark rumors they had heard about him. Curious, Jin asked Alec about his next plans. Alec explained that they were heading to Morburg, but now, after everything, he considered himself Jin's slave and insisted on following him wherever he went. Jin felt uneasy with Alec's strong sense of loyalty. Wanting to keep Alec safe on the journey to Morburg, Jin suggested they travel together for now. Once they reached the capital, Jin planned to introduce Alec to his brother Esther and give him something in return for offering himself as a slave. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Alec's eyes filled with tears, and he hugged Jin tightly. From a distance, 3 figures watched the scene unfold, including a female elf who found Jin quite intriguing. Jin and his party had to fight off the remaining horde of orcs to cross the border. After a fierce battle, they finally reached the goblin forest. True to its name, the forest was overrun with goblins, but Jin was more than capable of handling them. He took down many with ease, though the sheer number of goblins was overwhelming. Soon, the rest of his party joined in to defeat them all. After the fight, everyone was exhausted and collapsed onto the ground to rest. One of the group members turned to Jin and asked, "How is it that you're not seriously injured, even though you were right at the front?" Jin chuckled nervously, scratching his head. "I guess it's thanks to my strength," he said modestly. Technically, he wasn't wrong. His ability to enchant objects with magic had greatly boosted his physical abilities. At that moment, a fairy-like girl interrupted. "Impressive," she commented, introducing herself as Karen, the leader of the Sacred Flame Party. A man beside her introduced himself as Bogard. The third person in their group studied Jin carefully. "You're a sorcerer, aren't you?" he said, a hint of curiosity in his voice. Jin smiled, excited by the realization. "The name's Will," the man added, reaching out to shake Jin's hand. Jin took Will's hand, and as they talked, Jin quickly assessed the party status. He noted that Sacred Flame was an A-rank group with highly skilled members. What really caught his attention was Will's special ability. He had a weapon appraisal skill listed in his status. Jin wondered if that's how Will had figured out his enchantments. "How did you know about my enchanting abilities?" Jin asked, intrigued. Will grinned. "I could see it in your gear. Every piece of your equipment is infused with physical enhancements, boosted by a solid +8, no less. That's something only enchanters can pull off, and it's rare to see such consistent upgrades across multiple items." The adventurers nearby overheard the conversation and quickly bombarded Jin with questions. Will, intrigued, asked if Jin would be willing to enchant something for him, of course, for a fair price. Jin explained there were specific conditions for his enchantments. For it to work, the owner's blood had to be dripped onto the object being enchanted. This way, only the owner could benefit from the enchantment's effects. Alternatively, Jin could go through Moorbird for a different approach. He asked the party to keep his abilities a secret until he officially reached their level. The group agreed to his terms without hesitation. Will then mentioned that they were all adventurers from Qual, and having an enchanter like Jin in their ranks would be a huge asset to their nation. Jin was open to any price for his enchantments, as he had never encountered an enchanter before and had no idea what the usual rates were. He offered them several cards explaining how each one could be used. Will was stunned to learn that Jin could provide not just assessment magic, but also storage magic and even alchemy enchantments, an incredibly rare ability. All three party members already had enchanted gear, so the only thing left was for Jin to enchant some appraisal cards for them. However, by this point, Jin was already exhausted, having drained much of his energy. He kept drinking mana potions to stay on his feet. Each member dripped a bit of their blood onto the cards to activate the enchantments. Will was especially thrilled with his appraisal card and asked Jin if it could reveal their latent talents, as the cards only listed their current skills. Jin shook his head. "No, talents aren't certain," he explained. "A person's potential might never fully develop, which is why it doesn't appear on the card." The adventurers from Sacred Flame rewarded Jin with a hefty amount of gold and valuable items in exchange for his enchanting services. However, Will found it odd that someone like Jin, who possessed rare and powerful items, was traveling without a caravan. Curious, he asked about it. Jin hesitated but eventually revealed that he had been exiled. This revelation shocked the group, and they pressed him for more details. Jin explained that people had always kept their distance from him, accusing him of being untrustworthy. Even his own family didn't know about his abilities because he feared being used by those in power. Over time, this caused him to distrust everyone around him. Will, appreciating Jin's honesty, thanked him and invited him to join them on their journey to the kingdom of Qual. He promised Jin a warm welcome there. Though the borders were crawling with monsters, Will assured Jin that, with their combined strength, the journey would be a breeze. Jin agreed to accompany him, and soon they set off. They quickly arrived at Moorbird. Since no one in the town recognized Jin, he took the opportunity to shop. He eagerly bought a variety of goods, including armor and a spear for Esther. The shopkeepers were astonished to see a young boy buying such expensive items, but Jin paid for everything without hesitation and carried the goods back. That night, Jin worked tirelessly to enchant the items, especially the ones meant as gifts for Esther. He used a large amount of mana potions and spent the entire night perfecting the enchantments. The next morning, he handed Alec a package to deliver to Esther. Along with the gifts, he gave the group enchanted cards that displayed their status. Jin had been practicing his enchanting magic nonstop, eager to improve his skills. After bidding farewell to Alex's group, Jin set off toward the border with Sacred Flame. Meanwhile, back at the Nomland estate, Esther had been placed under house arrest for 50 days. Her father officially declared her as the new heir and commanded her to forget about her brother. Alone in her room, Esther wept, her thoughts consumed by memories of Jin. After Jin left, Esther's father became abusive, hitting her whenever she did something he didn't approve of. Whenever Esther defied him, she was scolded harshly and punished by being locked inside the house for 50 days. Her father even went as far as declaring that Jin was no longer part of their family. Trapped in her room, Esther constantly worried about her sister's well-being. Despite everything, she firmly believed that Jin was still alive and safe somewhere out there. Meanwhile, in another country, Jin was busy battling monsters. She often spoke of Esther, expressing how hard she was working. Jin had joined forces with the Sacred Flame, a group of skilled fighters. Will, one of her teammates, effortlessly sliced through a massive monster using his wind cutter magic. Impressed by Will's abilities as an A-rank adventurer, Jin was told that her own power, especially her enchantments, would soon level up. Will admitted he was more skilled with fire magic but found it difficult to use in the dense forest. Karen and Bogart took care of the remaining monsters with ease. Curious, Jen asked Karen whether lower-ranked adventurers could now safely cross the border, given that most of the monsters had been dealt with. Karen explained that the area was still off-limits to adventurers ranked C or below. Merchants crossing the border usually brought A or B-ranked guards with them for protection. Venturing deeper into the wilderness risked encounters with wyverns, something that made Jen uneasy. Jin and his group finally reached the border of the country. A massive gate loomed before them, guarded by several soldiers. Jin wondered if they would be able to pass through without any trouble, especially since rumors claimed that no exiled person had ever successfully crossed the border. Sensing his worry, Karen and Bogart reassured him, promising to step in if anything went wrong. Officers here were treated like nobility. An officer ranked as high as S was seen like a duke, while others held ranks equivalent to earls or counts. The inspectors at the border only ranked as high as viscounts, meaning their party held more authority than them. Just then, a guard approached, demanding their identification. His eyes widened in shock when he saw Jin's ID, realizing he was none other than Jin Nonlin, the one who had been exiled. The guard couldn't hide his surprise and asked how Jin had made it to the border in just 5 days. Before Jin could answer, Karen stepped forward. "Why does it matter?" she questioned sharply. "He was ordered to leave the country, and he's done just that. There's nothing more to discuss." The guard, clearly irritated, snapped back. "How dare a commoner speak to me like that?" Unfazed, Karen shoved her ID right in his face. Beads of sweat started forming on the guard's forehead as he realized Karen was an S-rank adventurer. With a cold, dangerous tone, Karen leaned in. "If you don't shut your mouth, I'll use this moment to test my weapon on you." Terrified, the guard bolted, not daring to look back. A higher-ranking guard appeared, quickly apologizing for his subordinate's rude behavior. However, he couldn't hide his curiosity and asked why people from the kingdom of Quol were traveling with someone like Jin, whom he described as disrespectful. The guard went on to accuse Jin of attempting to poison his family's head for their fortune. Jin was stunned by the accusation, thinking his family must truly despise him to fabricate such a wild story. Will stepped forward to clarify the situation. "We're only escorting Jin because we heard he was exiled," he explained. According to the kingdom's laws, when someone is exiled, they must leave the country within a set time frame and are forbidden from returning. Jin has followed those rules, so there's no reason to stop him. The guard, still suspicious, argued that Jin had traveled too quickly, which seemed suspicious to him. Will, standing firm, defended Jin. "We've been traveling together for 3 days, and there hasn't been a single issue with him." Reluctantly, the guard gave up on arguing further and let them pass. With that, they finally crossed into the kingdom of Quol. Jin turned to Will and the others, grateful. "Thank you all for your help along the way," he said sincerely. Will, not missing a beat, asked, "Have you ever thought about how the kingdom of Rosala might react if they find out you're a mage?" He explained that Rosala might try to drag Jin back, or worse, eliminate him. "That's why I suggest you registered in Quoll," Will advised. "If you find work in the city and keep leveling up, you can eventually reveal your skills as an enchanter on your own terms. The people here in Quoll will support you, and as long as you're registered with Quoll, Rosal won't be able to harm you." Jin agreed with the idea and decided to head to the guild. Before they left, Will whispered some instructions to Bogard which Jin couldn't quite make sense of. Full of enthusiasm, Jin then turned to Karen and excitedly handed her a healer's card he had made just for her. Karen accepted it with a smile. When Karen and her group arrived at the Adventurers Guild, all eyes were immediately drawn to her. The crowd seemed mesmerized by her presence, with some adventurers even casting envious glances toward Jin, the newcomer accompanying her. At the front desk, they inquired about the registration process. Then the group asked Jin to show off some of the items he had hunted. Jin suggested they move to a larger space for this. Once in the guild's backyard, he pulled out several bags from his item box. The bags were filled with goblin ears. Not having time to gather the orcs' loot, he had instead brought their entire bodies. Jin tilted the item box opening toward the ground, and a flood of orc corpses tumbled out. The onlookers froze in shock, jaws dropping at the sight. If all the loot was exchanged for money, the total would come to a staggering 24.3 million yen. Jin was ecstatic. He had never imagined he'd amassed this kind of wealth. Back when he was still Gennaro, he couldn't even dream of reaching a six-figure savings account. With this haul, he'd earned enough points to qualify for a C-level adventurer rank. However, he still needed to pass the advancement test to make it official. The test involved a mock battle against an examiner. He was led to the combat arena, where a man suddenly appeared behind him and introduced himself as Snow, the guild master. "I'll be your opponent for this fight," Snow declared with a confident smile. News spread quickly throughout the guild that the master himself was personally testing someone. The members were buzzing with curiosity about the challenger's abilities. At the testing grounds, the referee announced they would combine both the D and C rank tests to save time. The guild master, intrigued, expressed his desire to face the challenger Jin, despite the referee's warning about the risks. The guild master was eager to participate. From the crowd, Karen assured him, offering to heal his wounds if necessary. This drew the ire of a few men among the spectators, clearly displeased with Karen's attention toward the guild master. With the signal from the referee, the fight began. The guild master was the first to strike, launching a swift attack toward Jin. Jin barely managed to dodge in time. The master followed up with a flurry of relentless strikes, keeping Jin on his toes. He was so fast that Jin struggled to keep up and took a minor hit to his cheek. The guild master remarked that most opponents would have given up within 3 minutes, making it impressive that Jin was still standing. It had been a long time since he faced such resistance. This time, Jin took the initiative and launched his own attack, but the guild master effortlessly dodged it. Jin quickly realized that the master's swordsmanship was at level 4. It was no wonder he was this skilled. The battle continued, with both fighters exchanging strikes. The crowd watched in awe, impressed that Jin could hold his own against the guild master. The master, now showing signs of fatigue, acknowledged Jin's endurance. While the guild master was beginning to tire, Jin remained unfazed. He praised Jin for lasting this long against him and declared it was time to end the fight. In a climactic moment, both attacked simultaneously. But with a clever move, Jin ducked under the master's strike and landed a solid hit to his body. The crowd gasped in disbelief as the outcome became clear. The guild master fell to his knees and admitted defeat. Karen hurried over and offered to heal him, but with a faint smile, the master said a simple potion would do the trick. Karen then turned to Jin, lightly poking his cheek and teasingly offering to heal him as well. Blushing, Jin responded that he wasn't even hurt. Will approached, clapping his hands, clearly impressed that Jin had managed to defeat the guild master. Curious, he asked Jin what his secret was. Hesitating for a moment, Jin admitted that he had been repeatedly enchanting his gear. Will immediately announced to the entire room that Jin was, in fact, an enchanter. The crowd was stunned by this revelation. The guild master, in disbelief, argued that there were only 3 enchanters in the entire world. Will reassured him of Jin's abilities, mentioning his membership in the Sacred Flame. To back this up, he even showed the guild master Jin's evaluation card, confirming his enchanting skills. The guild master, sweating and overwhelmed, tried to make sense of it all. Jin attempted to ease his mind, explaining that he wouldn't have won without using his enchantments. The master let out a nervous chuckle before declaring Jin as a temporary C-rank adventurer. Jin celebrated at first, but his excitement quickly turned to concern as he realized the rank was only temporary. He turned to Will, asking why he hadn't received a full rank yet. Will explained that enchanters automatically start at S rank, but until it's official, Jin would be stuck at C rank for the time being. He also emphasized that the guild needed to see his abilities in battle. If Jin didn't prove himself, the government would send guards to monitor him around the clock. Jin couldn't help but wonder why Will was going out of his way to help him. Surprised by the question, Will grinned and replied that he was curious to see what kind of story Jin would create. He confidently promised that with Jin's enchanting skills and potential, he could even reach SH rank, a rank higher than S, granting freedom from authority. If Jin succeeded, he could essentially become a feudal lord. Will then asked if Jin was ready for that challenge, knowing it would take a tremendous amount of effort. Reflecting on all the unfair treatment he had endured in the past, Jin saw this as the perfect opportunity to prove himself. With his enchantments, he resolved to work tirelessly and achieve SF rank.